la presentación del invitado del día de hoy. Wieslaw, como se pronuncia, el apellido ustedes lo tienen, hoy quieren intentarlo. Es director actualmente del Museo y el Instituto de Zoología de la Academia de Ciencias Polaca, que queda en Varsovia. Ha sido el director del Departamento de Ciencias Biológicas, ellos le llaman División de Ciencias Biológicas de la misma Academia de Ciencias. Tiene más de 100 publicaciones en diferentes aspectos de diferentes organismos. La gran mayoría de ellos en murciélagos, sin embargo tiene también publicaciones con poblaciones de ratas y con otros mamíferos, principalmente mamíferos. Para mencionar un ejemplo, una de las citas de él, una de las referencias de él ha sido más de 1000 veces citada por su importancia en el tema de los murciélagos. Actualmente es editor del prestigioso journal especializado en murciélagos, se llama Acta Quiropterológica, desde 1999. Ya tiene 16 años de ser el editor de esta acta. Actualmente está involucrado en 7 proyectos de investigación de 9 diferentes tópicos, principalmente de estos organismos. De los premios más importantes que ha tenido Wieslaw es que recibió el premio de la división del Departamento de Ciencias Biológicas de la Academia de Ciencias Polaca por su trabajo de doctorado, que fue sobre variación genética y taxonomía de unos murciélagos miotis travetoni. ¿Está bien? Después recibió un premio de la Sociedad Real de London, específicamente en el campo de historia natural. Recibió una beca Fulbright para hacer sus estudios de doctorado en Estados Unidos. También ha recibido becas del Museo de Historia Natural, que queda en New York, y otros museos en Alemania y otros países. Es miembro de muchos comités científicos de varias diferentes instancias de investigación. Recibió una medalla de la Academia de Humanidades de Polonia, casualmente sobre sus estudios sobre Nicolaus Copernicus, que es casualmente lo que nos va a hablar el día de hoy. Sin duda, una persona muy joven, con mucha trayectoria y presencia científica, muy jovial, muy social. Nosotros tuvimos la oportunidad de llevarlo a gira con 11 estudiantes, el grupo de Bernal y el grupo conmigo. Fuimos a Manuel Antonio, fue una experiencia interesante, porque estuvimos capturando no solo murciélagos, sino monos, y bueno, ahí vimos su interés científico y compromiso en la investigación, porque por 13 horas sin comer estuvimos metidos en la selva. Wieslaw, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros.
Thank you very much. As my Spanish is limited to vamos a la playa, so my talk will be just in English. I'm sorry for that. Let's hope next time it will be Spanish. I'm really grateful to Professor Gustavo Gutierrez and Bernard Rodriguez Herrera and the university to invite me here for this talk, and I'm happy to be here with such nice people. I met a lot of great students here, and I'm hoping to pick them up for the fellowship in Poland. So let's hope. But let's switch to my talk. I would like to tell you a little bit about Nicolaus Copernicus. Everybody knows, the famous astronomer, but what happened to him? So he was born in the Kingdom of Poland in 1473. His father died when he was at the age of 10. So the care of him was taken by the Bishop of Warmia, a very important figure in the Catholic Church, by his uncle Lucas Watzenrode. So here you have places which are connected with his history. He was born here and in Torun. These are recent borders of Poland, much larger than El Salvador. And this is Frombo. Then he has been working for a long time. He obtained a very good education at the universities at the Kingdom of Poland and in Italy, in Bologna, Padova and Ferrara. So most of his astronomical discoveries were made in Frombork, in northeastern part of Poland, when he served as a canon. And canon is a figure in the Catholic Church below the priest. He was never a priest. And he died at the age of 70 in 1543. So, as you know, he was the astronomer who proposed a world-changing theory. In 1543, in the year of his death, he published the Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. But he also is known because he was a very educated person, and he worked for the King of Poland. He also published several other papers on completely different subjects. For example, he was very much interested in the economy, and in that science he is known as Copernicus Gresham law. His work is known as the Copernicus Gresham law, and that law says that bad money drives out good money. If there was a king falsifying money, then that money will be dominating in the economic world and not the good money with a good amount of gold and so on, or silver. This is one of his theses, and please remember that he lived in the 15th and 16th century. And what about his findings? We know about geocentric model, but I'm just curious if you ever thought, what does it mean? Of course, everybody knows that in the center is the Earth, but what about the other planets? So, before Copernicus performed mathematical works, people thought that in the center there is the Earth, and the next planet is the Moon. And afterwards you have Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Mars. Sun was once one of the planets between Mercury and Mars. Afterwards, he published the Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium. The system was completely changed. And now we know there is the Sun and some other planets. But when you count them, you won't see as many as we know about them today, because he performed all his observation by naked eye. So she reached his conclusions until Saturn, based on naked eye observations and just using very simple instruments. No telescope, no lunetas, nothing else. He was a very clever person. So he died in May 1543 because of too high blood pressure. He was paralyzed. And the legend says, perhaps it's true, that the Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, his main work, which started to be published a few months before his death in Germany, came to him at the day of his death. So it's really amazing that although paralyzed, he was able to see his monumental work. On the other hand, he delayed his work because he knew that this is a revolutionary theory, and he was afraid that the church will forbid the book. So he even devoted the book to the Pope. Nevertheless, the book has been forbidden for more than 200 years. So almost 500 years passed by. The heliocentric theory started to be accepted by everybody. But where is the grave of that person. So we knew that he was, at the last years of his life, serving as a canon in the Fromborg Cathedral, but no grave. I remember when I went for an excursion to the Fromborg Cathedral, which is in the northeastern part of Poland, and you can see that cathedral. So I was asking the guy, where is the grave of Copernicus, And he told me, somewhere here on the floor, you know, somewhere here. So where? And nobody knew that. So there were several attempts in the history with trials to find the grave of Nicolaus Copernicus. And one of the trials was taken by Napoleon on his way to Russia. Of course, Napoleon was beaten, but nevertheless, he was trying in 1802 to find Copernicus' grave. No way, no chance. Afterwards, some Germans, before the Second World War, because that area belonged to Prussia at that time, they tried also to find Copernicus' grave. But it was really difficult. From history books, it was known as that Copernicus as a canon, and there were 16 canons during his lifetime. As a canon, he served under one of these altars, and he was buried under one of these altars. But how to count them? So Germans had a very good idea that it should be under one of these altars, but they counted wrongly, the other way. And there was a historian, Polish historian in the 70s, who read these books, you know, about the history of the Fromborg Cathedral, and he said, no, the counting has to be done the other way. So it has been proved that Copernicus was responsible for Holy Cross altar. So scientists started to look for his bone remains under this altar. These excavations were led by Professor Gąsowski from the Institute of Anthropology and Archaeology near Warsaw. So it was very difficult because, you know, it's a big cathedral. There was geological scanning. People were trying to find empty spaces under the floor. And when the crypts were found, they had to open it, but first everything had to be poisoned. You know, perhaps from the books, that opening such open spaces with bodies inside, with bone remains inside, may pose a serious health problem to everybody working there. And there were some scientists, for example, working in Egypt, dying because of different poisonous bacteria, mortal bacteria and fungi living on the crypts. So it was really important to clean everything, and afterwards to take the floor out, to take sand out, because the same sand had to be put back after the discovery was done. So there were several skeletons under that Holy Cross altar, and one of them was at the age of 70. 60, 70, because based on the bones you cannot be very sure. So scientists assume that probably it's the skeleton of Nicolaus Copernicus. And there was found a cranial part of the skull, but never mandible. So we don't know why. It simply mandible disappeared. So there were some scannings of the skeleton done using 3D scanners, and you see this is the part of the cranium without incisive, and another picture of the cranium, and 3D reconstruction of the skull, and some bones from the grave which was suspected to belong to Nicolaus Copernicus. And having this material and 3D scanning, you can make 3D model which later can be used for reconstruction of face and so on. So the model was ready at that time to face reconstruction. How does the Copernicus look like? There are several portraits from after, but all of them were made after his death. So the latest ones are from the second half of the 16th century. And this is one of them. As you will see, carefully, he had straight hair and rather long nose. Intelligent person, I'd like to say. What's also important, do you have long noses? What's also important, when you look carefully on that skeleton, you will find on that picture, you will find the scar. Please look. And that picture was made by a painter who was known by very good work, very detailed work. During his paintings were done with very high precision. So scientists assume that that scar probably is not an artifact, that could be a true. So this is one of the portraits from the second half of the 16th century. And this is another one, completely different. You see curved hairs and so on. But look, there is again the same scar on the portrait, completely different. And this is the skull, which was taken from the Holy Cross altar, the same. You see, probably when he was young, he could fall down and make such a scar here on this size. So afterwards, there was a central police laboratory which was engaged in the face reconstruction. And I talked to that policeman, Dariusz Zajdel, you know, about his reconstruction, because it's very difficult. You need a lot of experience. The jaw was missed. So I was talking to me, how did you do that? You know, he's excellent specialist. And I said, simply I invested a lot of time, and based on my experience, I made this reconstruction. And what did you find? What do you think? Because he didn't know with whom he's working. You know. What did you find? I thought there is somebody's grandfather, you know. And afterwards, the reconstruction led to such a portrait. So when you will look carefully at the portrait from Goluchov, the first portrait I presented, and this one, they are more or less similar. And there was a lot of rumor about this discovery, and a lot of media were interested in the finding. So we even have Copernicus on our banknote, but from the past. Now we have no such huge banknotes. After the nomination, 1,000 equals 1, but it was the time we were millionaires. So we really appreciated that. But now look carefully at the pictures. So everything was fine. You see, reconstruction, skeleton, but I thought that it's not enough. So I went to this study by chance, because I was shaving myself in the bathroom, you know, listening to the radio, and I heard that scientists discovered the skeleton of Copernicus. So I thought they certainly will need a genetical proof that it's true. So I took a phone and I called the professor from the Institute of Anthropology archaeology say in the future you will need a genetical proof. But you know, archaeologists are different. He told me, no, we'll do this work ourselves. But 6 months later, he called me, he was telling, okay, please do this work. And we did it for him for free. So we did genetical work, and just a few words about DNA. The first cases when DNA was used in identification dates back to 1985, when there was an Egyptian mummy of the child, and Svante Pabo, very known scientist, performed this DNA screen. Another case, for example, when only mitochondrial DNA was used, there was a discovery of remains of Francesco Petrarca. That was an Italian poet, but the story is very nice because they didn't find anybody from his family, but from the history they knew that when he was at the good age, he was kicked by a donkey. So there was a trace of kicking on his ribs. And they found the skeleton. They proved that there were some kicks on the ribs. Some ribs were broken. Not sure if by donkey or not, but nevertheless that was the trace helping the identification. And this is another very well-known story. The last Tsar of Russia and his family, the entire family was shot by Bolsheviks, and many dozens years later, DNA checking after finding some bones in different places proved that they really belong to the Romanovs family. So what's about our study? At that time we had very simple equipment, so we focused on mitochondrial DNA. And as you know, mitochondrial DNA is passing from mother to daughter, from daughter to her daughter, etc., through matrilineal line. So we took some bone samples, the molar, and a part of femur, the second molar, and the part of marrow, to perform this DNA identification. Because the people were not certain if the bone remains which were dispersed, all bone remains, belong to the same skeleton. So there was femur here, humerus here, cranium here. So we studied different parts of the body, and we proved one thing: this is a single individual. So we made just a very preliminary step. What about the other things? So we needed a reference. As you know, in genetical studies, in this type of studies, you need somebody to compare with. But how to find somebody? Just making an announcement, "Oh, Copernicus, please come," or "Please call me"? Impossible. In fact, it wouldn't be true. So there were some other scientists looking for graves, for bone remains of his family. And when looking at the mitochondrial DNA, it's, as I was telling you before, it's passed through maternal line, from mother to daughter, maybe passed to the son, but afterwards it stops. So there is a Copernicus, that's his mother, so he could have the same mitochondrial DNA like his father, and that's his grandmother. So his mother had the same mitochondrial DNA that his grandmother. And there is his uncle, Lukas Watzenroder, the person taking care of him when he was young. And he was a bishop of Varna, very important church clerk. So we thought nothing easier like find his uncle. Of course, dead uncle. So he would provide a good maternal lineage if his DNA material or tissue would ever been found. And you see, in the Frombo Cathedral, you may have hundreds of these graves of this. What's the Spanish name for? Yeah. and how to find Lucas Watzenroder. These are rather costly studies, and for sure, Lucas, being a bishop, could probably have his own crypt. But where is his crypt? There were also 5 other bishops in the Frombork Cathedral, but no crypt ever been found. So, what about his brother? His brother is here. His name is Andrzej. But unfortunately, he was a canon, like Copernicus. No wife, no kids. Impossible. What about his sister? One was a noun, so no kids either. But fortunately, he had the second sister. Do you have 2 sisters? Please do it. For geneticians, it's very important, really very important. And we know that there are some kids and more from her. But, please follow further. So, no uncle found, no DNA from uncle. So, what about others? The checking of marriage books, or death books, or birth books led to the end of the 18th century and no more data after that. And what was also very important, that Copernicus came from the noble family. They were pretty rich, and usually they had marriage with other nobles. As there were not too many nobles like today, there were some inbred problems. So checking of the matrilineal genealogy shows that there were 83 documents telling about marriage of women at that time. Mean age of women married for the first time at that time was 30 years, which is quite a lot. The range was 17 to 55, but as many as 26 couples had no children. So what about that track? That track led to 3 families, you see. And when you look carefully, so in the future perhaps, looking for such names may provide genetic material for Copernicus study. And when you will look carefully, nobody is called Copernicus. So even if somebody today has a name Copernicus, it's certainly not from the Copernicus family. Just look for these names. Weise, Walrawe, Wolke. Most important names in the future discovery. So we prove something, you see, that all the bones belong to the same individual. Nothing interesting, saying frankly. Huh? A lot of work, but output rather poor. So checking, looking for his uncle, failed. No good uncle. Looking for his family, failed. Either in the Catholic Church or not reproducing sufficiently. No graves left. And that was a problem. So we thought we failed. And suddenly, the head of these excavations, Professor Gąsowski, went to Sweden. And I must tell you something. Poland is between Germany and Russia. But we also have some fighting with Swedish people and some others from time to time. And in the middle of the 17th century, they invaded Poland. And they went to the place Copernicus was working, to northeastern Poland. It was a big invasion, you know. They were staying for a long time. The country was completely destroyed. By the end of the 18th century, we were so poor, so we lost our independence. Poland was divided between Prussia, Russia, and Austro-Hungarian Empire, and we gained our independence again in 1918. So it was a really invasion of Swedes in Poland. Afterwards, we defeated them. They took everything with them. So during the occupation, Swedish army took Copernicus library from the Fromborg Cathedral, including one of very important books, Calendarium Romanum Magnum, by Johannes Steffler. And during that talk, Professor Gonsowski, that person leading the excavations, went to Uppsala, and he had a talk about Copernicus. Everybody was interested, and then he said, unfortunately, we have nothing to compare with the genetic profile we found in the bone remains in the Fromborg Cathedral. And then suddenly one of the Swedish astronomers approached him, and he told me, I know where you will find Copernicus DNA. And he took him to the library in Uppsala. They found the book, the calendar, this calendar taken by Swedish army in the mid of the 17th century, and they found some hair going page by page, you know. They found 9 hair, and from 4 of them it was possible to extract DNA, and they were afterwards very important in our story. Please wait a while. Just a suspense. So they were looking very, very carefully. Why this book is so important? Because he had a lot of books in his library, and books were very valuable at that time. That's why the Swedish took that as a trophy. Because in that book there were handwritten notes by Copernicus, and it was obvious that they aged something, the time span was something like 25 years. So he was using this book for at least 25 years. And then you see how the hair is important. So we did the genetic analysis. We had mitochondrial DNA from molar and femur, and then Swedish geneticists, they had 9 hair. From 4 hair shafts, it was possible to extract DNA. 5 failed. It's very difficult to do it from hair. But 2 of them match perfectly the DNA profile we found in bones under the floor, several hundred kilometers away from Uppsala, Sweden. So we really were very happy. And in our opinion, it was a good indication that the bone remains belong to Copernicus. So we also performed some genetic analysis, and unfortunately it appeared that Copernicus belonged to, in terms of mitochondrial DNA, to H haplogroup. And H haplogroup is very common in Europe. Something like 50% of people have H haplogroup. Nevertheless, detailed analysis of punctual mutation indicated that the same mitochondrial DNA profile, like Copernicus, can be found in 5 Germans, 2 Poles, and 1 Romanian, as I remember, 1 Danish person, and 1 person from Bulgaria. So not so many. And the frequency, depending on checking, can be like 1 to 500 or 1 to 1,000. That means that 1 person among 1,000 persons has the same DNA like Nicolaus Copernicus, mitochondrial DNA profile. So he was here in this place. What about others? We started with mitochondrial DNA, but of course there is also nuclear DNA. So we look at the maternal line first, and afterwards we switch to the paternal line. You know, fathers are still important. I don't know about the future, but nevertheless. So we also performed Y chromosome checking, and because we wanted to know, people were not sure You know, first we wanted to prove if really the skeleton belongs to a male. And we have a very famous movie, it's a comedy, you know, the title is Sex Mission. This is the world, who knows, perhaps it's true, when all men disappeared and only women are left. But two men survived because they hibernated. And they discovered by women, you know. And let's say 100 years later, and after brainwashing, many of them didn't know that even men existed in the past. So when they started asking where we are, what happened, everybody was, where is Copernicus? So everybody was saying to them, Copernicus is a woman, because they didn't know that men exist. So, but using our DNA studies, we proved that Copernicus was a man. It was another huge discovery. So we performed that Y chromosome profile checking, and it didn't provide too much information, you see. The same Y chromosome can be found in several people in Europe, living in Europe, you know. But nevertheless, still in Poland, because we count Copernicus is from Poland. Germans are of different opinion, but nevertheless, I'm counting on Poles. So, this is the story. When we are looking at the maternal line, you know, at mitochondrial DNA, then it started to be obvious that his mother probably came from Prussia, from Germany. And these are these points, you know. Afterwards, some others were added. So, who knows? But based on the history, probably Prussia. But we also had some discoveries in Copenhagen, in Great Britain, in Bulgaria, in Romania. And in terms of paternal checking, as you saw, there were several points, but nevertheless, Poland and history and Germany was among them. So, after discovering that the bones belonged to a single individual, that Copernicus was a man, we were curious, perhaps we can get more interesting results, you know. So we also performed DNA checking in terms of phenotype. So, for example, we look at a single mutation at one of the genes, HERTZ2 gene. And here, based on the mutation, you have probabilities of iris color. So here, for example, for this CC mutation, there is high probability that the person will have this color. Here for CT, rather this color, but this uniformly more or less distributed. The same in the case of timin mutation. How was in the case of Copernicus? We found that probably he had blue as a gray eye, green cannot be excluded, hazel only 3%, but certainly not brown, neither brown nor black. So this is probably the color of Nicolaus Copernicus. Beautiful eye, look at this. So we published this paper about our discovery in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and we also proposed them the cover, you know, the face of Copernicus and its coding, CT, CT, CT. Nevertheless, they didn't accept the cover, but the paper was published, so we are very grateful to them. So, what happened later? In the Catholic Church, as you know well, if bones are taken out, they have to be put back, and it has to be done in a proper way. So there was the second funeral, which was taken place in May 2010, almost 500 years later. I know that that funeral was very nicely commented by a very good scientist from the US, Owen Gingerich, who is a very good specialist of Copernicus and his life. And commenting that, he said that I wasn't sufficiently fast to meet him at the first funeral, so I decided to be at the second one. here you see Mikołaj Copernicus. We say Mikołaj Copernicus, and this is Nicolaus Copernicus. It was a huge ceremony. There was somebody from Vatican, a high-ranking figure, which is somehow, after abandoning his book, the figure from the Catholic Church, it was really impressive. A lot of people attended the funeral. What about future plans? So now we started with a very poor sequencer. Now we have 5 of them, very sophisticated. So this is one of them. So we hope that we will be able to get much more data to do next generation sequencing and to provide really something about his origin and about his phenotype. Because you see, there are several genetic characters which may be identified based on single or few other mutations. And that include human height, which is not well defined because there are many genes involved in that process. But for example, eye color, hair color, skin color, hairlessness. Oh, I see, 1, 2, 3. So that can be checked in the genes. Hair morphology, as you remember, the pictures of drawings of Copernicus were very different, either curly or straight hair. Facial morphology, earlobe, shape, everything can be checked using genetics. It's a fantastic tool. So this is about hair morphology, but genetics proved that he had straight hair. So his face was rather more similar to that one than to this one. And what's about another discovery? Because there are several books in Uppsala which were taken as a trophy from Poland, And among one of them, there were some hairs of somebody else, a cat. So perhaps we will know which cat was staying with Copernicus, who knows? Future plans, you see, because genetics is a fantastic tool. I love it. So, for example, we are working with the bone remains of royal family members, of the first royal family members, which created the country. And Poland was Christianized in 1966. And this is the picture of our first king, the banknote 2000. It's now like this. But nobody knows. This is just an imagination. We have no access. There are no his bones available. But nevertheless, there are some bones from his family, through the paternal line, from the 11th and 12th century. So now we are involved in sequencing of the entire genome of these bones to get an idea where this dynasty is from. There are 3 hypotheses. Vikings, Swedish everywhere, I don't know who is Swedish here. Then autochthonic people, Slavs, or perhaps from Moravia, from the southern part of the continent, let's say. And another project, this is about gigantismus. This is a person, gigantismus, of course, it's a rare disease, but nevertheless, what's really interesting, that person was found in bone remains date back to the 12th and 13th century. And at that time, he or she, scientists are saying that perhaps it has to be checked, she was 215 centimeters high. So, and he also had a bone cancer. And she died at the age of 25, 30 years. So it seems to me that it will be another beautiful history to tell you about. So in summary, coming back to Copernicus. So we discovered, based on bone remains and 2 hair shafts, that the same haplotype, like was found in Copernicus, may be observed a few times in Germany, twice in Poland, and once in Denmark, Romania, and Bulgaria. And the Y chromosome haplotype can be observed in many countries in Europe, including those around Poland and Poland itself. And then a single mutation of one of the HER2 gene revealed that Copernicus might have had a light iris color, beautiful color. And molecular determination also showed that he was a male. I like that discovery. So, final conclusion is that together with all these anthropological findings, we supported the identification of the human remains which were found in northeastern part of Poland as those belonging to Nicolaus Copernicus. Muchas gracias.